Never shine if you don't glow. Hey everybody, welcome to the second video on this channel. Today we're going to review Mark Manson's Q&A. Why do you ask? Because that's the idea for today, and we're just trying to upload one video, maybe two videos, just a month of going with it on a YouTube channel to see what bears fruit. Instead of just having ideas in our heads, we're going to experiment and try things. Because gosh darn it, being an overthinker is no fun. It's not a fun way to live. So we're going to go through it. And I love Mark Manson. I've been following him since he was a blogger and a dating advice giver, and saying, be honest, man, attract the ladies by telling your truth. And you know what? Gosh darn it, that's pretty good advice. So here we go. So the first part of this, the first question is around, I can't remember all of the questions. I'll just kind of tell you my rough notes. But basically, he makes a comment about how traditional media is dying and it's overrated, and that there is this sense that we can't really trust in the traditional news networks or kind of the corporatized media, and that there's this shift from corporatized media to content creators like myself. I don't know if I'm a content creator, this is my second video, but just content creators in general, because there's a bit more honesty around that form. It seems like there's less of an agenda, specifically a profit agenda. There's more free thinking. I guess we could, in a broad sense, just call this alternative media. So cool. So he talks about how he is bullish on that, and if you are a content creator, then very likely you are in a good time in human history to be one. So keep doing it. Let's see what's next. Then he talks about thoughts on manifestation. Someone asked him about, like, what do you think about whole law of attraction and manifestation stuff? And he talks about how he wrote an article a long time ago called The Staggering Bullshit of the Secret, where he basically said that manifestation is actually just leveraging cognitive biases. I think in the article he talks about confirmation bias. It's leveraging perceptual cognitive biases to notice things that you actually want to notice. So if you tell your brain, I want to buy a Lexus SC300 from 1997, then all of a sudden your brain will start noticing Lexus SC300s. It's not really because the universe is conspiring for you to get your Lexus SC300. It's because when you tell your brain something is important, your brain will start to associate that thing as important and bring you those associations. So you got to be really careful what you attend to, because if you're attending to the wrong kind of shit, then you'll get more of that shitty shit. So, but generally speaking, a manifestation isn't bad or good. It's just a little bit too at danger of becoming a narcissistic kind of, the universe wants me to get what I want. And it's all the universe, man. Someone's up there with just waiting for me to ask for, my Lamborghini or whatever. So, cool takeaway. Don't become a narcissist and think the universe is just all about you. But also understand that paying attention to what you want as opposed to paying attention to what you don't want is leveraging your perceptual biases in a pretty cool way that is going to probably be pretty helpful. Next one, a person asked about failure, and he basically says, ask yourself the question, or the viewer says, what do you think about failure? How can I deal with failure? And he responds, hey, you should ask yourself, what failure is going to benefit me the most? What a fucking cool question. What failure is going to, because we think, even with this channel, I know that this is going to fail. I don't know, but I have a really good idea that this is definitely going to fucking fail. But the failure of making a video a day and then watching myself 30 days from now and looking back and saying, hey, you fucking did it. You made a video a day. Like, I'll probably learn throughout this process. And if I was afraid of failure, I would have never started the process. So what failure is going to benefit you the most? Maybe it's making a shit ton of subpar YouTube videos. Go figure. So I love that. I'm going to take that to heart. Another viewer asked him about luck, and he says that luck is always happening around us, but we're not always acting on it. So this is, he comes from a cognitive perspective, where he's talking about, like, what you're perceiving is going to open up the doors to how lucky you can be. So, if you are trying to be an actor, you'll start perceiving, oh, this guy's a director and this guy's a screenwriter. Like your brain will be primed for that. And that's all around you. But if you just sit at home doing nothing, then, and your brain is primed, but you're not doing anything, you're not going out, then you're not going to be lucky. So I interpret this as a quote that I heard a long time ago. It says, miracles happen around people. Cool. All right. Morning routines. Someone asked about that. He says that they're overrated. He says his morning routines are random like the universe. And he basically says, he didn't say random like the universe. I said that. But the most important thing here is that he talks about how if you have something that you're excited about, then your morning routine is going to take care of itself. A morning routine is really just, am I waking up and am I excited to work on something or do something? Like the whole optimization thing can work against you. If you're optimizing for shit that you really don't care about, meaning like I watched Goggins or Huberman or Will Nick or whatever his name is, and they all told me I should be waking up at 4:30, but I fucking hate waking up at 4:30. Like if you're optimizing just for the sake of optimization, it's going to start working against you. So he says you should really pay attention to your nighttime routines. Nighttime routines are like, it makes sense because we got to sleep well. Sleep is so fucking fundamental. So, yeah, man, maybe I'm going to take that to heart. Probably, I have a morning routine, I'll be honest, and I wrote it down and it really helps me. It's in no particular order. Make sure I make my bed so I don't feel like a slob. Brush, floss, sunscreen on my face, minoxidil on my head. Fuck yeah. Shave and shower. Walk my dog who is sleeping because she's not interested in this content at all. And run, swim, blah, 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 eat yogurt, and then plan out the day. So I think a rough structure is pretty good, but I agree with what he says. If you wake up and you're excited about something, then the morning will take care of itself. But you should definitely protect the nighttime where you really need to be getting ready for sleep and rest and preparing to do it all over again the next day. Okay, so the next question was about shame. And he talks about, what does he talk about with shame? Is there such thing as healthy shame? And he talks about how, like, in the self-development world, we're all about no shame, man. Shame is always bad. And you see a lot of things shared from Gabor Mate, or is his name Mate? I think it is. Or Jordan Peterson, or prominent different psychologists saying, or what's her name? Brene Brown, shame equals bad. But his perspective is that that shame is healthy when it's attached to not harming others. So if you have a child and they steal from someone, you say, hey, don't steal from someone, then that shame is pro-social because they're not going to want to steal from someone in the future because they feel that shame. So it's functional shame. Shame is unhealthy when it's attached to things that you shouldn't be shamed about, like your sexual orientation, or like your obsession with Pokemon or Dragon Ball Z, or how much you watch South Park, or your weirdly specific borderline erotic pleasure from breaking the little handles off of mechanical pencils. I'm certainly not speaking from personal experience there. Okay, then someone asked about exercise and alcohol, and because Mark has stopped drinking, I guess he says it's been 500 days, probably more. And he also exercises a fuck ton. And what he basically said is something that I can speak to with a bit of authority, because I've gone through this, my own personal experience with this, is fuck, man. Like real talk. Not with the alcohol. I've just quit alcohol, or I'm cutting way the fuck back. But with exercise, man, the big ingredients here are it's going to take way longer than you think. You got to kind of do it when you don't really want to do it, but the net feeling is that you should want to do it, which is his whole argument, is like find something that you want to do. But I don't necessarily totally agree with that, because when I started exercising, it's because I was in a depression and I just didn't want to go on an antidepressant. And I was like, fuck, okay, well, what can I do to not have to go on an antidepressant? And then I looked up a bunch of research that showed that, zone 2 cardio for, I think it was 20 minutes a day. Don't quote me, maybe 30 minutes a day, whatever. It was just a study. outperformed antidepressants, or at least matched them and sometimes outperformed them. So I was like, all right, well, that'll get me sexy, and hopefully that'll get me like mentally healthy. So anyways, his whole thing is that it takes a lot longer. You don't see the work behind the scenes. And I totally agree. Like patience, 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 patience. Fail, 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 fail. Practice, recommit, recommit, recommit. And be consistent, like small, consistent wins. It's not about like trying to kill it. It's not about going out and running 8 miles. It's about going out and running 2 miles and doing it every day for a month, or trying to do it every day for a month, and then going to 3 miles when you feel better, so on and so forth. Okay, so this one was really cool too. He talks about envy. I had never heard this perspective, but he said, one viewer asked, like, how do you deal with envy? What the fuck? Like, how do I stop being envious of people that are in better shape than me, or that have more money, or that have a better relationship, or whatever? And he ends up using, I believe it's Bill Gates and David Goggins as examples, but he says, if you're going to envy and he cites a dude, I can't remember who he cited, you have to look at the video, but he cites a dude and he says that he got this perspective from, and he says, if you're going to envy something about somebody, you need to envy the entirety of that thing. So, for instance, if you really, really envy my balding head, then you also have to envy all of the men that came before me that were also balding. Right? So there's a big thing, but he says with Bill Gates, if you really envy his money, you have to envy the 30 years of relentless working on one thing that got him there. And do you really envy that? If you don't envy that, then don't envy him. Do you really envy David Goggins? Do you really want to go through 3 SEAL hell weeks in a year on broken legs? Or do you just want to be someone that is like as badass as him and is mentally tough? If you don't envy all of the shit that he went through, all of the kind of sacrifices, if you don't envy the sacrifice, then don't envy the reward. But if you envy the sacrifice too, then maybe that's more of a role model and less of, envy that you're feeling. And then he's asked about insecurities, and his response is, don't fight your insecurities, embrace them. I think that if I was going to expand on this personally, this is absolutely true. My insecurities get the best of me all the fucking time. But what I will say is helpful is that when you have insecurities, a mixture of like anger and love is really helpful. So for example, if I was insecure about my hair, I could say, oh man, obviously I've mentioned it a bunch of times, but like if I was insecure about my hair, I could try to circumnavigate it and say like, oh, it's okay and blah, blah, blah. And, I think it's really more about personality. But maybe that's not true. Maybe how I really feel is, this is fucking shitty. I hate losing my fucking hair. I feel like I'm looking older and getting older, and it's no fucking fun. But I'm having to deal with it, and it's okay. And I'm working out more, and I'm having to let go of that part of me that is so concerned with that. But fucking A, is it sucks sometimes. There's just no way around it. No one likes losing their hair. So there is a self-awareness, I think, that is a kind of a key of like, yes, this hurts me, but I'm not going to let this thing that hurts me diminish me. I will go toe-to-toe with it. And the way that he talks about it is he just kind of makes fun of it. He just tries to befriend it. He tries to be open about it so it doesn't control him. I think that's pretty cool. For me, there's deeper insecurities that I'd be really afraid to be open about, even though I know it wouldn't fucking matter, but I still have hang-ups about expressing them. Okay, and then this is the question that I asked that he actually responded to. What was the difference between the blog days and the YouTube days? And he basically said it was easier to be a blogger, because you get instant feedback. You could be in the shower, have an idea, write it, turn it into an article, and see if people liked it. But for YouTube, you definitely need a team, and you also need to come up with an idea and not have that idea be executed for weeks and weeks. So there's you have to really feel like the idea that you have is a valuable one. Kind of the opposite of what I'm doing on this video, which is just kind of going for it. But hey, we all got to start somewhere. He also says that when he thinks about making a video, or when he thinks about whether or not something will be successful, he asks himself the question, what needs to be said right now in the culture, or just in general, that nobody else is willing to say? Let me be that guy. Let me say it. It's pretty cool. You got to have some balls to be able to do that. Or you just have to have a temperament that is very low in neuroticism and relatively stable, which we don't all have. Someone said, is social media necessarily bad? This was really cool. I learned about this. I kind of knew this, but he really put it together for me. Social media is super bad for women. It disproportionately affects young people and women in particular in terms of mental health and how that is shown in the literature. Like that demographic just seems to struggle a lot more. So young people, girls, and people that are prone to anxiety and depression have a rough go with social media. So, but people that are mentally healthy are relatively, good with themselves in their life. They don't really struggle with social media as much. And I think that the reason for that is all behind the intention. I think a lot of women use social media, especially young people use social media for comparison and to try and, see who's attractive and who isn't or whatever. And then they measure themselves up against that. And then they get these unrealistic expectations of how they should be acting or looking. And it's rough, man. And he was talking about how Jonathan Haidt wrote a new book. I can't remember what it's called. Anxious Generation. I guess that's what it's called. And Jonathan Haidt says that he thinks that phones should be kept out of schools altogether and that people under 16 shouldn't even be allowed to be on social media. Mark tends to agree with that. I think I agree with that too, actually, but it just sounded really extreme from what's happening now. So, but it would definitely take care of all the weirdos that are watching like 14-year-old girls dance around and liking their shit. Like that's just fucking gross and weird. Okay, and then he talks a bit about goals, and he says that the value of a goal is the direction it gives you. So he's always talked about how goals aren't that important. Goals are goalposts. They're things to run toward, but they're not things to flagellate or... Is that flagellate? Is that farting? Flagellation. Or what's the thing where they're not things to hurt yourself with or to like double down on the fact that I'm a failure if I don't achieve my goal or whatever. He says that your goal should serve you, not the other way around. I really agree with that. I had a goal last month of running 100 miles in 1 month. I was able to get it. I'm really fucking tired now because of it. But yeah, it does give you a goalpost, but it's cool for me, somebody who struggles with a bit of perfectionism and anxiety, to remember that I can drop a goal when it's not serving me. But once I get a goal, sometimes I get real dogmatically committed to that goal, and it'll start to tyrannize me, and I'll forget that I can just go, But I digress. Okay. Someone else asked about like the extremeness of things. Is there an extreme side to everything? Is there an extreme side to spirituality? I think is what was talked about in the podcast and or the video. And he said, yeah. He said that anything when taken to an extreme becomes toxic. And he ends up quoting Oscar Wilde that moderation is key, but like even moderation should be taken in moderation, something along those lines, which is pretty cool. But it's just a good reminder, man, that like the tendency is to dramatize things. The tendency is to go from one polar opposite to the other. And it is an art form to stay to the best of your ability neutral on things and relatively centered in things. And I think that that's probably what he was getting at. So, but yeah, that's cool. Hold on loosely to ideas. If you're feeling really hyper extreme about something, then there's probably something very telling that you're missing or willfully ignoring. We'd already talked about that. Someone asked, what's some bad life advice that you followed for a long time? And he said that the freedom, like optimizing for freedom, is actually kind of a paradoxical trap. That if you are free and you have nothing going on and you have all these options, it sounds wonderful because you can go to Sri Lanka, then Baton Rouge, then to Hawaii, then to Detroit, and then back to Santa Cruz and make a stop in England. And that all sounds wonderful because look at the world is your oyster. But what he found out and what I am trying to get myself to do more and more, since I struggle with commitments too, is that you have to kind of give something up in order for that thing to take on meaning. And I think that that's so true, that like I can't think of anything that becomes valuable that isn't also sacrificial in some way. Like something only becomes important when you decide that I'm going to sacrifice this thing for that thing. You know, if you're not willing to sacrifice anything, then things just kind of maintain this equal value. So anyways, and he also made a comment that he says that he thinks that human beings need to be weighted down by something. And that really struck me too. It's like, yeah, you know what? In a way, I don't want to admit it, but like having a forced structure, whether it's by like some big bad corporation or some career that I choose or some person that I'm committed to, in a way it does keep me, there's a certain level of safety and regulation to it, that just being completely open, I don't know how to describe it, but being completely open is being untethered in a way. So yeah. And then someone else talks about like when you're someone else asks like, how do you manage to be ambitious but also not be a big douche? Like you've achieved all this success, you know. And that's obviously not the question, but it was something along those lines. And this really stuck out to me too. He says, be humble while also being ambitious. Be ambitious about things that you know are difficult. And then he talks about how most of the time when we think about doing something ambitious, we think about it from this perspective of, I need to be self-aggrandizing. I need to become as big as the thing that I'm thinking about doing. And I see that all the time on social media, and that seems to get rewarded. But I really do think that a lot of the coolest things that you can do are just this little ball of light in the privacy of your own soul that is just kind of burning, that you know is there. And to a certain degree, I think that thing should be protected. Like you can want to be president, but telling everybody that you want to be president, it almost hurts that little ball that is yours. It subjugates it or commercializes it for other people to consume, and I think that that's out of the spirit of doing something of value. You know, so humble while ambitious. I don't know. Those were just my free-flowing thoughts on that. Another person asked about like, should I stay off social media? And he said something pretty cool, which was, I wouldn't think of it this way, but it's like, it's not good or bad to be on social media. There's just trade-offs for and against it. And you should think about what the trade-offs are or aren't for you. You know, if you're on social media and you're somebody that feels like, I just don't fucking like this. I don't care about these people's posts, and I don't feel like when I post anything that it means anything to anybody else. And I personally would rather keep my life private, and I don't like being sold all this shit and watching people dancing and doing ridiculous shit all the time and how it affects my dopamine, blah, blah, blah. Then maybe the trade-offs of being slightly less connected to trends or people that you know is worth it. But maybe none of those things bother you, and the trade-offs aren't valuable enough to you to leave it. So that's a cool way of thinking about that. Someone asked about comparing yourself to others. He says that we can't stop comparing ourselves to others unless we are a sociopath. I guess what he's getting at there is that sociopaths aren't really able to empathize, and the degree to which we can have empathy or be in somebody else's shoes and have an idea of what it would be like to be in somebody's position that is elevated above ours, we will continue to do that because we want to grow, and it's a natural impulse to compare ourselves to others. The caveat that he says is like, hey, if you're going to compare yourself to someone, just make sure you're doing it to somebody that is actually admirable, and make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. I guess that would be what would be, like Andrew Tate would be a good example of a poor comparison. Like, a lot of his behavior is not super admirable, and the intentions behind it, generally speaking, I think are for men to, in a strange way, in a not healthy way, gain self-esteem or power from a state of powerlessness that they probably subjectively feel, which is why the powerful guy is so resonant for them. He then, last couple here, he talks about getting over an ex. Someone asked about that, and he says, there's 5 things to getting over an ex. He says you shouldn't be in contact with them if you can't talk to them and not get worked up. He says focus on bettering yourself. He says reclaim or at least revisit old hobbies. For me, I used to write a lot of songs, so hypothetically, I would just start writing a lot of songs. Reconnect with friends and family, and don't date till you're excited. I think that's all pretty damn good advice. I would say that I'm not great at getting over exes. They all still linger, and I would just say that that's pretty reasonable and fine if you love somebody and then that love doesn't really go anywhere. But you always have a decision on how to approach that love or that person that now lives inside of you. And just like you can decide how to react to emotions. Like, you have the emotions, but that doesn't mean you have to do what your emotions always tell you. In fact, very often your emotions are suggestions that aren't actually super helpful. They're like false alarms. So anyways, and then someone asks about where do you land in this unfair and unjust world? How do you know when to say your opinion and when not to? And he just had a conservative answer. He's like, you should really be careful when something is labeled unfair or unjust, because usually it's in a very short time window and we don't know how it's all going to play out. And you can put your flag in the ground and say, I side with this, God damn it. But then in 3 months, you might have your foot in your mouth because that person that you sided with is actually, I don't know, a goat molester, or just ends up becoming something pretty, something that you couldn't have predicted in the moment that you planted your flag in the ground. So it sounds to me like he's saying, keep an open mind and make sure you have enough evidence if you're going to, have a strong opinion about anything. I have no idea why anybody would watch this whole video, but if you did, awesome, and I will see you tomorrow. Adios.